The colony world of Brighthaven was a small place on the edge of human space. It had wide valleys, cold nights, and skies filled with two moons. People came there to farm and mine, hoping to live a peaceful life far from the center of the galaxy. But peace never lasted long in places like this. One day the settlers found something strange near the forest that touched the mountain line. It was not a machine, not a lost human, but a living being. She was taller than a human, with skin that looked like dark silver under the moonlight. Her eyes glowed faintly when she opened them, like soft lanterns in the night. Her hands ended in claws sharp and frightening. Her voice was low and strange when she tried to speak. The settlers were afraid. They did not know her name or her kind. They only knew she was different. They whispered to each other, "She is dangerous. She is not like us. She is a monster." The word spread quickly. Soon the local guards captured her and brought her into the center of the colony. They locked her in a cage built of steel, the kind used to hold mining beasts. Chains were fixed around her arms and ankles. She did not fight much. She only stared quietly at the people around her. But her silence did not calm their fear. It made them more nervous. Every evening, people came to look. Some pointed at her glowing eyes, some laughed nervously. Others threw scraps of food near her feet as if testing to see what she would do. Children hid behind their parents, peeking out with wide eyes. No one saw her as a person. They saw only the shape, the claws, the glowing eyes. They saw a monster. Among those who often stood in the crowd was a man named Daniel Ray. He was not rich, not powerful. He had once been a soldier, serving in a faraway war. But now he lived quietly in Brighthaven, working as a guard for the mines. He was a quiet man, the type who did not speak unless it was necessary. People often forgot he was there, even when he stood right beside them. Daniel came to the square one cold evening after his shift. The air was sharp, and frost had already begun to form on the ground. A crowd had gathered as usual, whispering and pointing. Daniel walked closer and looked at the cage. The alien sat in the corner, her knees pulled to her chest, her eyes half closed. She had no blanket, no covering. Her breath rose in small clouds, showing how cold she was. The people around him spoke in low tones. "Look at her claws. She must be a killer. Her eyes shine like fire. She is cursed. She is a monster, I tell you." Daniel listened, but he did not speak. He only looked. In his years of soldiering, he had seen many things. He had seen true monsters, machines made for war, bombs that turned cities into fire. He had seen men act like beasts, hurting others without reason. Compared to that, this chained figure looked less like a monster and more like a prisoner. She looked at the crowd once, her glowing eyes passing over their faces. Most people turned away quickly, afraid to meet her gaze. But Daniel did not. For a moment their eyes met. He expected rage, or hatred, or something dark. But what he saw surprised him. Her eyes were tired. They were filled with something that looked like sorrow. That night, Daniel returned to his small home near the edge of town. It was a simple place with only a bed, a chair, and a shelf with a few books he never read anymore. In the corner lay an old blanket, one he had carried during the war. It was worn and patched, but it was warm. He sat on his bed, staring at it for a long time. He thought of the alien in the cage, her breath forming frost in the cold night. He thought of the crowd calling her a monster. The next evening, Daniel returned to the square. The cage was still there, the alien still inside. The crowd was smaller, this time. Some had grown bored, others had gone home. Daniel walked closer, the blanket folded under his arm. The guards at the cage laughed when they saw him. "Ray, what are you doing?" one asked. "Going to feed your monster?" Another joked. Daniel did not answer. He stepped to the bars. The alien looked up, her glowing eyes watching him closely. The crowd grew silent, waiting to see what he would do. Daniel slowly unfolded the blanket. He held it for a moment, then pushed it through the bars. The alien did not move at first, she only stared. Then, with slow, careful hands, she reached out and took it. She pulled it around her shoulders, holding it tightly as if it was the first warmth she had felt in years. The crowd began to whisper. "What is he doing? He gave her a blanket? Is he mad?" Daniel said nothing. He did not try to explain. He only stepped back, his face calm, his eyes steady. The alien's eyes softened. For the first time, she did not look like a monster. She looked like someone who had been cold, and someone who was now warm. That night, Daniel went home without a word. The crowd laughed behind his back, but he did not care. In the cage, the alien sat with the blanket wrapped tightly around her. She did not sleep, not fully, but her eyes no longer looked only sorrowful. For the first time, they held a small spark of something different. It was not much. Just a blanket. Just silence. But sometimes that was enough to change everything. The cold nights of Brighthaven continued. The 2 moons shone bright and frost spread across the stone streets of the colony square. Inside the iron cage, the alien sat wrapped in the old blanket Daniel had given her. The guards thought it was funny. The settlers whispered that the soldier had lost his mind, but the alien did not laugh or whisper. She only held the blanket close, as if it carried more meaning than anyone else could see. Daniel returned the next evening. He came after his work at the mines, his boots heavy with dust. The crowd was smaller now. The people had grown tired of staring at the monster. Some still came, only to keep their fear alive with gossip. When Daniel arrived, a few guards noticed him. They smirked. "Here comes the hero of monsters," one guard muttered. "Maybe he's making friends with her," another laughed. Daniel ignored them. He stepped closer to the cage. The alien sat quietly, her glowing eyes lifting, to meet his. She did not move, but he could see the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders. It was a simple cloth, worn and patched, but she treated it as though it was treasure. Daniel sat on a wooden crate near the bars. He did not speak. He never did. He simply sat, his hands resting on his knees, his eyes calm. The alien tilted her, head slightly watching him. For a long time they stayed like that, 2 figures in silence, one outside the cage, one within. The settlers nearby grew restless. "Why does he sit there?" a woman whispered. "He doesn't even talk to it," a man said. "It's unnatural," someone else muttered. But Daniel did not care for their words. He remembered his days as a soldier, when silence had saved his life more than speeches. He remembered sitting with wounded comrades, when there were no words that could heal but only presence that could comfort. He thought this moment was the same. Words were not needed. The alien shifted at last. Slowly she adjusted the blanket, then placed one hand flat on the ground near the bars. Her claws touched the dirt lightly. She did not reach out, but it was the closest she had come to showing trust. Daniel noticed but did not move. He simply let his gaze fall on her hand for a moment, then returned to watching the sky. The second moon rose higher. The air grew colder. A few settlers left, muttering that Daniel was wasting his time. But when the last of them walked away, the alien's voice finally broke the silence. Her words were rough, broken as if she had learned only fragments of the human tongue. "Why, blanket?" she asked softly. Her voice was deep yet quiet, filled with confusion. Daniel turned his head. He met her glowing eyes. She stared at him, waiting for an answer. He did not give one. He only shrugged slightly, then looked away. Words were not easy for him. He believed actions mattered more. The alien frowned as if puzzled, then pulled the blanket closer around her shoulders. She did not ask again. The next night, Daniel came again. This time he brought a small loaf of bread from his rations. The guards laughed when they saw it. "Careful, Ray," Feed the monster and she might follow you home. Daniel ignored them as always. He placed the bread near the bars. The alien hesitated. Her claws twitched. For a long moment she did not move. But then, slowly, carefully, she reached forward and pulled the bread to her lap. She sniffed it, then tasted it. Her eyes flicked up to Daniel. She did not smile, but there was a softness in her gaze, a silent recognition. She tore the bread in half and placed one piece near the bars, pushing it back toward him. Daniel blinked. He had not expected that. For a moment he thought of refusing. But then he reached out and took the piece of bread. He ate it quietly, sitting across from her. They shared the simple meal in silence, as though it were some ancient ritual. When the guards saw this, they muttered among themselves. She's sharing with him? That's not right. Monsters don't share. But Daniel only kept eating, calm and steady. Days passed, and a pattern grew. Daniel came after work. He sat near the cage. Sometimes he brought food, sometimes nothing at all. The alien always wrapped herself in the blanket, and sometimes she copied his movements. If he sat with his legs crossed, she sat the same way. If he tilted his head toward the sky, she did too. Slowly, the barrier of fear began to fade. One evening, the wind howled through the colony square. Snowflakes drifted down, melting on the stone. The alien huddled deeper into the blanket, her eyes half closed. Daniel removed his worn jacket and folded it, pushing it through the bars. She stared at it, then at him. For a moment she did not take it. But then her hand moved, pulling the jacket to her lap. She slipped it on over her shoulders. The fabric was too small for her frame, but the gesture mattered. She looked at him for a long time. Then she whispered in her broken human tongue, "Not monster?" Daniel met her gaze. He shook his head once, firmly, without words. Her eyes glowed brighter in the dim night, not with danger, but with something else, something close to relief. The guards who stood nearby shifted uneasily. They did not understand what they were seeing. To them, she had been a beast, a threat. But in that moment, she looked nothing like a monster. She looked almost human, wrapped in a soldier's blanket and jacket, holding on to the smallest kindness she had ever known. Daniel stood at last. He gave her a small nod and turned to leave. Behind him, the alien pressed the blanket and jacket close, her eyes following him until he was gone. For the first time since she had been captured, she did not feel entirely alone. It was still just silence, just simple gestures. But slowly, silently, a fragile trust had begun to grow between a human soldier and the one they all called a monster. The nights in Brighthaven grew colder as winter came. Frost covered the stone streets like a thin sheet of glass, and the air stung with every breath. Yet every evening, Daniel Ray walked to the colony square, boots crunching against the frozen ground. He always stopped at the same place, the cage where the alien sat, wrapped in his old blanket and jacket. By now, most of the settlers no longer bothered to watch. The novelty had faded. They had already told the same story too many times. The monster in chains, the soldier who gave her warmth. But for Daniel, it was not a story. It was a routine, a quiet promise. The alien's eyes followed him each time he arrived. At first, she had only stared, silent and still. But slowly she began to move when he moved. If he sat cross-legged, she shifted into the same posture. If he leaned back against the crate, she leaned against the bars of her cage. She was learning, copying, perhaps even trying to understand him. On one evening, when the moons were half hidden behind drifting clouds, Daniel placed a small tin cup of water through the bars. The alien took it carefully, her claws sharp but her touch delicate. She drank in slow sips, then gave the cup back. For the first time, Daniel heard something soft from her lips. "Thank you." Her words were broken, heavy with effort, but clear enough. Daniel paused. He gave her a short nod. It was not in his nature to answer with many words. Yet the simple nod carried meaning. She tilted her head, glowing eyes fixed on him. "Name, you?" she asked. Daniel hesitated. Then he pointed at himself. "Daniel," he said. Her lips moved as if testing the sound. D-ni-el. The syllables came out rough but close enough. She then placed one clawed hand against her chest. She spoke a sound that was unlike human language, deep and echoing, hard to repeat. Daniel tried once, stumbling over the strange syllable. She tilted her head again and gave a soft sound, something almost like laughter. It was the first time he had heard anything close to joy in her voice. After that night, she tried more words. Broken, slow, but improving. Daniel realized she was learning from him, not just gestures, but language. He spoke little, but even the few words he used became her lessons. Days passed into weeks. Every evening, Daniel sat by her cage, and every evening she grew braver. One night she reached her hand out through the bars, claws curling against the cold iron. Daniel looked at it for a moment. Slowly he set his own hand on the bars near hers, not touching but close. Her eyes glowed softly as she studied the nearness. For a moment the distance between them felt smaller, but not everyone welcomed this fragile trust. In the meeting hall of Brighthaven, the settlers argued. Some said the alien should be kept alive for study. Others said she was dangerous and should be sent away or destroyed. The guards complained that Daniel was making her too comfortable. One shouted, "He's feeding it, clothing it, teaching it. Soon the monster will think it's one of us." Daniel said nothing during these talks. He stood near the back, arms crossed, eyes steady. He had no wish to argue. Words would not change the minds of those who had already chosen fear. That evening, when he went to the square, he found the alien restless. She paced inside the cage, her claws scraping the stone floor. When she saw him, she stopped, her glowing eyes locked on his. "They hate," she whispered, her broken tongue heavy. Daniel stood still. After a moment, he shook his head. "Not all," he said simply. She blinked. The words seemed to matter to her. She sat down, clutching the blanket close, and repeated in a low voice, "Not all." It was a fragile truth, but a powerful one. The next day, Daniel brought her something else. A small wooden piece, carved into the shape of a bird. He had whittled it during his guard shifts, smoothing the edges with a knife. He placed it on the ground inside the bars. She picked it up carefully, turning it in her hands. "Bird," Daniel said. She studied the carving, then looked at the sky, where a real bird crossed the clouds. "Bird," she repeated. Her lips curved slightly, not quite a smile, but close. From then on, their silent meetings became something more. She learned words each night, repeating them after him. Sky, stone, cold, warm. Each word built a small bridge between them. She listened with care, and Daniel, though never a man of many words, found himself speaking more than he had in years. Yet the fragile peace was threatened. One night, Daniel overheard two guards talking. "They'll move her soon," one said. "Where?" asked the other. "To the Capitol labs. They want to cut her open, learn what she is." Daniel's jaw tightened. He walked away without a word, but his mind burned. He thought of the blanket wrapped around her shoulders, of the bird carving in her hands, of the way she whispered, "Not all." He thought of the spark of trust in her glowing eyes. When he reached the cage that evening, she seemed to sense his unease. She tilted her head. "Daniel." "Heavy eyes," she said slowly, piecing the words together. Daniel sat down, staring at her through the bars. For the first time, he wished he knew more words to give her. But in the end, he simply said, "Danger." She frowned, repeating the word. "Danger. Me?" He nodded once. She held the blanket tighter. Then, after a long pause, she whispered, "Trust you." The words hit Daniel harder than any order he had ever followed. She trusted him. though all others called her a monster. The moons rose higher. The square was empty. In the silence, Daniel made a choice. He did not speak it aloud, but he felt it deep inside. He would not let her be taken. And as he left the square that night, the alien's glowing eyes followed him with a new light. No longer just sorrow, but a fragile hope. The rumors spread quickly in Brighthaven. Some settlers claimed the alien would soon be moved to the capital for study. Others whispered about rewards, saying her body might hold secrets of power or wealth. In the meeting hall, the leaders argued late into the night. To them, she was not a person but an object of fear and curiosity. Daniel listened from the back of the hall. He never spoke, but he heard every word. He could see the greed in some faces, the fear in others. None of them saw what he had seen. The way the alien whispered broken words, the way she held onto a simple blanket as if it carried the warmth of trust. That evening, Daniel went again to the cage. The air was heavy with snow, flakes drifting down from the two moons. The alien was waiting. She no longer sat in the far corner when he came. Now she sat near the bars, her glowing eyes watching for him. When he arrived, she tilted her head. "Danger?" she asked softly. She had remembered his warning from the night before. Daniel lowered himself onto the crate near the cage. He nodded, once. Then he pointed at her, then at the sky, then away into the distance. "They will take you," he said, his words slow, simple. Her claws tightened on the blanket. Her eyes narrowed, glowing brighter. For a moment she looked like the monster people feared. But then her shoulders lowered and she whispered, "Not safe." Daniel nodded again. "Not safe." Silence stretched between them, filled with the sound of falling snow. Then the alien's voice broke it, carrying a weight heavier than before. "Must tell." Daniel frowned. "Tell what?" She pointed at her chest, then lifted her clawed hand toward the sky. Her words were broken, halting but filled with effort. "I last of guard." Daniel's brow furrowed. "Guard?" She nodded slowly. She searched for words, struggling to shape them in his language. "My people. Guard gift. Old gift. Heal. Worlds." She tapped her claw gently against the ground. "Not weapon. Not monster. We keep safe." Daniel's breath slowed as he listened. She was not just some strange creature. She belonged to a people who had protected something important, something that could heal. And now, if she was the last, the secret rested only with her. He leaned closer. "Gift. Gone if you gone." Her glowing eyes softened. She nodded once. "Gone. Forever." Daniel sat back, his hands resting on his knees. He thought of the settlers who wanted to cut her open, to tear apart what they did not understand. He thought of the leaders, already planning how to profit from her. If they succeeded, the gift she spoke of would be lost, destroyed by greed. Alien saw the worry in his face. She whispered, "You blanket, you trust. I tell truth." Daniel gave a small nod. He believed her. Not because of her words alone, but because of her eyes. They were not filled with lies or cruelty. They were filled with the same sorrow he had seen on the first night, mixed now with hope. For days after, Daniel thought of her words. At work in the mines, he swung his pickaxe without focus. At night, he sat in his small home staring at the empty bed where the blanket had once rested. He could not forget what she had said. Heal worlds. Meanwhile, the colony leaders made their choice. They sent word to the capital requesting transport. Within days, a ship would come to take the alien away. When Daniel heard the news, his jaw tightened. That evening, he went to the cage again. The alien was waiting. The blanket wrapped around her like armor. "They come," Daniel said quietly. She lowered her head. "Then, end." Daniel shook his head. "Not end." His voice was firm, though still calm. He leaned closer to the bars. "I help." Her glowing eyes widened slightly. "Help?" Daniel nodded. "Help. Escape." For a long time she was silent, the snow piled around the cage, the moons casting pale light over them. Then, at last, she whispered, "Trust you." Those words sealed it. Daniel rose from the crate, his decision final. He had once been a soldier, bound by orders. Now he was only one man, bound by something stronger, kindness. He would not let them take her. The next days moved quickly. The settlers prepared the square, strengthening the cage for transport. Guards sharpened their weapons, though they had never seen her attack. The leaders walked with pride, eager for the capital's reward. None of them noticed Daniel moving quietly, studying the routines, marking the times when the square was least guarded. Each evening he still went to sit by her cage. He did not speak of his plan aloud, but he knew she understood. Her eyes followed his every move. Once she pressed her claws lightly against the bars and whispered, "Daniel." "Brave." He gave no answer. He only stayed longer that night until the moon sank low. At last the day came when the sky thundered with the sound of engines. The capital's ship appeared, a dark shape cutting across the clouds. The settlers cheered. The guards stood straighter. The leaders smiled. But Daniel felt only the weight of his choice. That evening, as the settlement prepared for the transfer, Daniel walked to the square one last time as if nothing was different. The alien waited, the blanket tight around her. Their eyes met. She whispered a single word, "Ready." Daniel gave the smallest nod. The truth had been revealed. She was no monster, but the last guardian of a gift that could heal worlds. Now the time had come to act, before fear and greed destroyed it forever. And in the cold light of the moons, Daniel knew one thing with certainty. He would stand by her side no matter the cost. The night the capital ship landed, Brighthaven was filled with noise and light. Engines roared in the sky and bright search beams cut across the clouds. Settlers crowded the square, whispering with excitement. Guards marched in lines, weapons ready, as if preparing for a war. At the center of it all sat the cage, heavy chains holding the alien inside. She was wrapped in the blanket still, glowing eyes fixed on the sky. She looked calm, but Daniel could see the tension in her shoulders. She knew this might be her last night in Brighthaven. Daniel moved quietly among the guards, keeping his face calm, his steps steady. He had been a soldier once, and he knew how to look like he belonged. No one noticed his eyes, watching, measuring the timing of each patrol. No one saw how his hand touched the small tool hidden in his coat, a cutter he had borrowed from the mines. When the crowd finally began to drift away, leaving only guards at their posts, Daniel walked to his usual place near the cage. The guards smirked at him. "Your friend leaves tomorrow," one said. "Maybe she'll miss you," another joked. Daniel said nothing. He sat on his crate as always, calm and silent. The alien leaned forward, her claws gripping the bars. She whispered, "Daniel, now?" He gave the smallest nod. The moons were high, and the square was quiet except for the guards' footsteps. Daniel waited for the right moment. When the nearest guard turned away, Daniel slid the cutter from his coat. He pressed it against the lock of the cage. Sparks hissed as the tool bit into the metal. The alien watched closely, her glowing eyes fixed on his hands. Her breath came quick, clouds forming in the cold air. She knew this was her one chance. The lock snapped. The sound was soft, but sharp enough that a guard turned his head. Daniel slipped the cutter away and pushed the cage door open just an inch. "Go," he whispered. The alien hesitated. For a moment, fear flickered in her eyes. She had been chained for so long that freedom felt unreal. But then she tightened the blanket around her shoulders and stepped forward. The chains rattled against her claws. She was free. A guard shouted, "She's out!" Chaos broke instantly. Alarms rang across the colony square. Lights flashed red. Guards raised their weapons. Settlers woke in their homes, rushing to their windows. The monster had escaped. Daniel grabbed the alien's arm. "Run!" Together they bolted through the narrow streets, boots and claws pounding against stone. Behind them, shouts filled the air. Search beams cut across the rooftops. The whole settlement seemed alive with fire and sound. The alien ran fast, even with the chain still clinging to her ankles. Her glowing eyes lit the dark. Paths ahead. Daniel guided her, choosing routes through alleys he had walked many times. He knew the guards' habits, the blind corners, the places where shadows could hide them. They reached the edge of the settlement, where the fields stretched toward the mountains. The snow lay thick here, and the wind was sharp. But before they could cross, more guards appeared, blocking the way. "Stop!" one shouted. Daniel pulled the alien behind a low wall. Shots crackled in the night, striking the stone. The alien pressed close to him, clutching the blanket. Her eyes glowed brighter, almost burning with fear. "Daniel," she whispered. "They kill." He shook his head firmly. "Not if we move." When the guards drew closer, Daniel grabbed a stone from the ground and threw it far to the side. The sound clattered loudly and the guards turned their heads. In that instant he pulled the alien out of hiding and they ran again, dashing into the tall grass beyond the fields. The night swallowed them, but the chase did not end. The search beams followed, sweeping across the hills. Dogs barked in the distance. The capital ship's engines rumbled overhead. They climbed higher into the foothills, their breaths hard, their legs heavy. Daniel stumbled once, but the alien caught him with surprising strength, pulling him up with one arm. "You, safe," she said, her broken words strong. He nodded once, breathing hard. "Keep moving." Hours passed as they fled into the wilderness. At last, when the lights of Brighthaven were faint behind them, Daniel allowed them to rest in the shadow of a rocky ridge. The alien sat with the blanket still around her, her glowing eyes scanning the horizon. Daniel leaned against the stone, chest rising and falling with exhaustion. "Why, help?" she asked at last. Daniel looked at her. He thought of all the words he could say. About kindness, about war, about what it meant to see someone as more than a monster. But he only shook his head and answered quietly, "Because it's right." The alien lowered her gaze. She touched the blanket softly, then whispered, "One blanket, change all." For a moment, silence wrapped around them, softer than the wind. But their rest did not last. The sound of engines grew louder in the distance. The capital ship was searching the hills. Daniel stood, his jaw set. "We move again," he said. The alien rose beside him. She lifted her clawed hands and for the first time revealed a spark of her true power. Her palms glowed faintly, not with fire or violence, but with a soft light that warmed the air. She placed her hand against Daniel's arm, where a cut from the chase still bled. The wound closed beneath her touch. Daniel stared at it, then at her. She met his gaze and said softly, "Gift. Heal." He gave a short nod. "Then we make sure it lives." Together they stepped into the darkness once more, climbing higher into the mountains where her people's secrets waited. Behind them, Brighthaven burned with alarm and fear. Ahead of them lay danger, but also hope. For the first time, Daniel no longer walked alone. The mountains of Brighthaven were quiet, bathed in the pale light of 2 moons. Snow covered the peaks and icy winds whipped through the valleys. Daniel and the alien climbed carefully, the blanket still wrapped around her shoulders like a shield of trust and warmth. Behind them, the distant glow of Brighthaven reminded them of the chaos they had left behind. The alien led Daniel to a hidden path, one he would never have found without her guidance. Her steps were sure, even through the snow, and her eyes glowed, faintly, lighting the way. She moved like someone who had traveled these mountains long before humans ever arrived on the planet. Finally, they reached a hidden cave, carved into the mountainside. Inside, the walls were lined with strange markings glowing softly in blue and green light. Daniel's breath caught as he realized the place was ancient, untouched for centuries. "This home?" he asked, his voice low. The alien shook her head. "Not home, safe, guard, last." Her hands moved over the markings, pressing them gently. A soft hum filled the cave, as if the stones themselves were alive. Daniel stepped closer. "What gift?" She gestured to the markings, then touched her own chest. "Heal. Worlds. Protect. Life. My people. Keep balance. I. Last." Daniel understood slowly. Her people had not been monsters. They had been guardians, protectors of a power that could restore life, heal the sick, and repair damage to the planet. And now, all of that depended on her. "Then we protect," Daniel said firmly. The alien nodded. Together, outside, the first rays of the rising sun touched the snow. Daniel looked out of the cave entrance. The capital ship was still visible, though smaller now, searching the mountains. He knew their safety would not last long if they stayed in one place. "We leave soon," he said. The alien studied him, her glowing eyes thoughtful. Then she moved to the center of the cave, placing her hands on a glowing stone. Light spread across the walls, flowing like water. Snow and ice outside began to soften, and patches of green appeared where frost had once held the ground. Daniel stepped back, amazed. "You heal?" She nodded. "Not monster. Guard. Gift." For hours, they worked together. The alien showed him how to touch the stones, how to release small amounts of energy to heal the land without harming it. Daniel followed carefully, his hands trembling at first, then gaining confidence. Slowly, the mountain around them began to change. Trees grew where there had been none. Water sparkled in frozen streams. Life returned, quiet and gentle. As the work continued, sounds came from the valley below. Settlers and guards had followed, them, determined to claim the alien. But when they saw the mountain alive with color and light, they froze. The alien did not use her power to attack. She only let the land show them the truth. She was not dangerous. She was a healer. Daniel stood protectively in front of her, but he did not need to raise his hand. The beauty of the mountain, restored by her hands, spoke louder than any weapon. Slowly, the crowd below lowered their tools and weapons. Whispered words replaced shouts. "It heals? Not monster?" Amazing. The alien looked at Daniel, then at the people watching. "See truth," she said. Daniel nodded. "Yes, you protect, not hurt." As the light of the new day spread across the valley, Daniel and the alien stepped outside the cave. The snow melted beneath their feet, revealing soft green grass. The moons were gone, replaced by the sun's warm glow. The settlers approached, slowly. Their fear had not completely vanished, but their understanding had grown. One of the leaders, the same man who had shouted for her to be captured, took a hesitant step forward. "We wrong," he said. "We see now. You gift." The alien's glowing eyes softened. She tilted her head. "Yes, gift, protect, life, not monster." Daniel smiled faintly. He looked at the blanket still draped over her shoulders. "One blanket, change all," he said quietly, repeating the words she had spoken long ago. She pressed the blanket to her chest. "Yes. Trust. Change. Everything." For a long moment they stood in silence, looking at the valley below, the settlers watching, and the mountains stretching into the horizon. Then she looked up at the sky, glowing softly in the morning light. "Stars. Many," she whispered. "We. Not alone." Daniel followed her gaze. Beyond the mountains, the sky stretched wide and endless. He thought of the worlds beyond Brighthaven, the vast galaxy and the future that awaited them. For the first time, he felt hope, not just for themselves, but for all the life that might be healed by her gift. The alien stepped forward, no longer frightened. She moved with grace and calm, the blanket now a symbol of trust rather than fear. Daniel followed beside her. Together, they walked down the mountain, ready to show the settlers a new way, one of understanding, courage, and care. The settlers began to cheer softly. They no longer saw her as a monster. They saw the light in her eyes, the warmth of her heart, and the power of her people's gift. Daniel did not cheer. He only nodded at her. He knew this was the start of something greater than anyone had imagined, and as they reached the valley, the alien looked at Daniel once more. One, human. See truth, she said. He shook his head, smiling faintly. One blanket. Speak louder than fear. Above them, the sun climbed higher, touching the mountains, the valley, and the people below. The alien stretched her arms, releasing a soft glow that spread across the land. Life, hope, and trust grew from that light. The story of a monster changed, forever, because one human had chosen kindness and one simple blanket had shown what courage and care could do. The alien stepped forward, free at last, no longer a captive, no longer a figure of fear. Beside her, Daniel walked silently, proud, calm, and full of quiet joy. Together, they looked at the stars that still waited beyond the sky. And for the first time, the galaxy seemed full of hope.